excited, Rudy. I really am super excited. So, Rudy, why don't you give everyone the background of the film and what caused you to take it? Remember, this is going to be heard by people who didn't see it and saw and have seen it. So just tell everyone the story of your family and your sister. But first, we spoke for just 2, 3 minutes before. I want to tell everyone that I saw this film. It premiered last Monday night on HBO, and I told Rudy that when I saw it, I felt like I was part of his family. His family is such a loving, warm family, and they really went through, I don't want to say the worst of times, because I guess it could always be worse, but they went through some horrible times together. And it showed character, and I really wanted to be part of their family, and I wanted them to be part of my family. And I think that's a testament to the closeness and tightness of your family and the wonderful job that you did. Plus, I told you, Rudy, and I'll tell everyone else too, I shed a bunch of tears during it, tears of joy and tears of sadness, and I think a lot of people did. So with that, why don't you give everyone the premise behind the movie?
Yeah, so the film is about a woman, my sister, who received a 15-year prison sentence for a first-time nonviolent offense. The film isn't really about her offense per se. She's guilty. I say it in the film, and she admits it, and will always admit that she was guilty. She made some poor choices when she was younger, poor choices in the relationship that she had with a gentleman who was a drug dealer, and poor choices while she was in that relationship. The film is really about the sentence, the aftermath, and what happens is, Cindy's in this relationship with a gentleman, and he's murdered in what the police call a drug deal gone wrong. And after his murder, 26 people are sent away almost immediately. My sister is not, and she basically has a choice. Get her life together or continue down this road of making bad choices. And we as a family encouraged her to really get her life back together, and she did. She did in an amazing way. She ended up finding somebody new. She got a great job, finding somebody new. She got married, was pregnant with her third, when, nearly 5 years later, the federal government comes and knocks on her door. And, she was subsequently sent to trial and found guilty of conspiracy. And she didn't know when the cops came that morning that she was actually pregnant with her third. And after she was found guilty, the judge allowed her to go home and have the baby before she reported for sentencing. So she reported for sentencing when her youngest daughter was 6 weeks old and was given a 15-year prison sentence. My film basically starts the next day. And I started documenting the effects that the sentence had on her children left behind for over the course of a decade. And I did it because, while my sister is guilty and did deserve punishment, I had a tough time coming to grips with the length of the sentence. And, I wasn't a filmmaker when I started this film. I became a filmmaker to make this film, to tell this story. It wasn't until a few months after my sister went away, I flew back to Michigan. I was living in New York at the time. I flew back to Michigan to film her oldest daughter, Autumn's dance recital. And because it was something I wanted my sister to be able to see one day. And my sister calls completely unexpectedly, and she says this line to my niece. She says, "Do you know what mommy's going to do when you go to dance? I'm going to lay down in my bed, I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to think about you." And watching my niece's face during that conversation said everything to me. It said that I have an opportunity to tell a story that you don't normally get to see. The story of the people left behind, the true ramifications and the ripple effect that these sentences had. And I dedicated my life to telling that story because there are so many other people in the very same position that they are in.
So I want to back up a little bit. Just so people understand, your sister was not involved with dealing drugs. She was living with a bad guy at the time, and he was murdered. And her charge was, or what she was convicted of and sentenced to 15 years, 15 years, is because she didn't tell the police, conspiracy. I think that means she didn't tell the police that he was doing these bad things. Is that?
Yeah, that's true. That is true. You know, she was charged with conspiracy. Conspiracy consists of both knowledge and, you know, actionable. So she was in the house, living in the house, and I'm of course I'm not going to sit here and say my sister was a saint. She made poor choices. However, she wasn't the kingpin. She
Yeah.
wasn't the drug
I,
dealer. You know.
I'm not trying to bring out she was. She seems
Yeah.
like a very nice girl. I
Yeah.
guess my point is it's shocking to hear that someone could know about it, live in a house, and go away for 15 years. I mean, she didn't kill anyone. She didn't do anything
Right.
terrible. So I
Right.
just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah.
So so you started making this film when you started to shoot your and by the way, Rudy's nieces, there's three of them, and Cindy's daughters are the most adorable little girls, and you see them grow through the progression of the film. They're just adorable little sweet girls. But you
Yeah.
started to do this, I think, and tell me if I'm correct, to be able to show your sister Cindy the progression, so she would feel more part of the family when she got out. Is that
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I knew that, you know, during the beginning of her sentence, I was very much trying to figure out, you know, what this sentence meant. I literally thought that there was a mistake, that they were going to figure out that she's not supposed to be there. But however long she was going to be away, I wanted to be able to document the girls' lives. She was going to get pictures and she was going to get phone calls, but I wanted her to be able to watch them live and grow and run and play and all of those things. So I just set out to do that initially. That's all I wanted to do at the beginning.
when did it turn into? When did you realize that this would be instead of like a family film, a film of really a national statement, that a film that would be put out there to try to affect change?
Well, you know, I never knew how big it was going to be. I truly had no idea. But it was that moment when my sister called and said that line to Autumn, because I realized that there have been amazing films on the war on drugs and on mass incarceration. You know, the Jareckis have an amazing film called The House I Live In. Russell Simmons had an amazing film about the Rockefeller drug laws. Ava DuVernay's 13th. And so I knew that there were a lot of films out there discussing this and discussing the problem with mass incarceration. But I, I felt like I had an opportunity to tell a different film, almost a supplemental film to all of those amazing works. And it's about the people left behind. It's about what these sentences do and the longer lasting effects of them.
So really, you knew from the beginning, because that scene happened to be the day after she was sentenced. Or I'm not saying that day, but it was really from the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
did, how hard was it? Or let me back up. First, let me ask this question: did you use making the film as cathartic, or to help you get through this terrible ordeal that, I don't want to say ripped your family apart, but really ripped them at the core? Was it more comforting to you, or did you find solace in being able to film this?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a coping mechanism for me. When this happened to my sister, I didn't know what it was going to have me do, but I did know that I needed to fight and I needed to do something. You know, I became an advocate for her and for other families throughout the decade, and this was just this thing that I felt was an actionable item, because the fight for criminal justice reform is long and, to be honest, kind of boring. You know, it's like it's going and speaking and going to these hearings year after year, month after month, and seeing the same people over and over again.
And
And
nothing's happened. Nothing's happened.
I mean, I mean, it's unfortunate. You know, I
Yeah.
feel like we've been fighting this war on drugs for over 30 years, and as much as it, you know, gets a lot of bipartisan support, not a lot has moved on it. So it was my coping mechanism.
Gotcha. And how hard was it, or was it hard for the rest of your family? You know, you were, I thought, very moving scenes. I'm a father, and I literally wanted to come and give your father a hug, and your mother, and just everyone in the family. How hard or easy was it for them?
Well, I think it was. I don't think it was easy for them by any means, but you know, when I decided to make this a documentary, I basically made a promise to them. You know, I said, if you're willing to let me tell your story, if you're willing to be open and honest and vulnerable for me in front of the camera, then I promise you I'm going to do everything I can to try and make something good out of this. You know, to me, in life, in everything that has happened in my life and the life of my family, I've tried to make something good out of any bad situation, and I promised them I would do my best to try and do that with this. So they trusted me and they believed in me.
Got it. Now, through the process, Cindy went through the appeals process, and ultimately, after, I don't remember the exact length, but I'm going to say it was more than 10 years she spent incarcerated. And ultimately, President Obama pardoned her or commutated her sentence. And I think the number was, there was like 26 or 36,000 applications, and it was boiled down to like 1,600. Is that close to the number?
Yeah. So she did a little over, she did about 9.5 years in total.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was there was an initiative set out called the Clemency 2014 program that was started by the Obama administration. And under the initial criteria that were sent out, I believe 36,000 people qualified under the initial criteria. And so many of them were, it was a pretty big vetting system of who ultimately was given representation by a lawyer to be able to even submit a petition to that program. And then from that, they whittled it down and down and down. And then once you got through that process, then it went to the DOJ, to the pardons office, and then they whittled it down even farther. So I don't know the exact stat, but I think that ultimately about 11 or 1,200 people were given clemency by the president.
Gotcha. I think the numbers are, there's 3 or 4 million people in jail today in the U.S., and the vast majority of them are not the murderers and the rapists and the killers that people talk about. I'm going to say that's 5% of them. I'm not talking about them. I'm making this show, and you made your show for people like your sister who are non-violent offenders who are dealing with mandatory sentencing. So, but I want to get to that in a minute. I have just a few more personal questions. Did you guys work with any of the groups like the Innocence Project or any of the other groups to go through this process? Or how did you find attorneys to get through the presidential pardon? That's a tough thing.
Yeah, so the first 2 appeals that you get through, the sort of due process, or you can use a court-appointed attorney. So we use that for the first couple. The third one, you need to retain a lawyer for the third appeal. And I was able to retain one through a lawyer that I'd made connections with on another project I was working on. Ironically, she came through to help me write the appeal for the third attempt. And then after that, we ended up, by some miracle, qualifying for the Clemency 2014 program and ultimately being given a pro bono lawyer through that program. So with the help of Valdez, who happened to be overseeing that particular branch, we were given a pro bono lawyer, and she walked us through the petition writing process and really wrote the petition for us and put it through. So I didn't really team up with any organizations in the process of the appeals or the petition writing section of it. It was sort of something I was going alone at.
Gotcha. And throughout this time, you went around and you said you spoke and you were an advocate for your sister.
Yeah.
How's your sister doing today, bud? I have to ask it.
She's doing well. It's in some ways it's wonderful to see. She came home and she's fully taking advantage of this second chance, of this opportunity to spend more time with her children. She's really, she hit the ground running. She got a job almost immediately. She's been promoted, I think, 4 times since she's been home, and just spending a lot of time with the girls. And I think most importantly, well, people always ask, is she angry? Is she resentful? Does she have all these things? And she's really not. She's has a really positive attitude, and I ask her about that because I feel like, even from my perspective, I'd have a little bit of anger and I'd have a little bit of remorse or something. And she said, I don't have time for that. I've lost too much time already. I don't have time to do that right now. Maybe she'll reflect on it later, but right now she's just trying to, get her life back together, and she'll reflect later, I think.
It seemed when she was incarcerated, she had an incredibly positive attitude, and she was more worried about her family and her kids than herself. I mean, that came through, that same positive attitude. I was going to ask you if she had that before she went in, or how did she maintain that? Because I would think that, after going through that, being ripped out of your family and just all these terrible things, you would have a post-traumatic stress syndrome. You would be like so traumatized by the experience, but she didn't seem to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And I think, part of the thing I talk about when people ask how she's doing and how the girls are doing is, they're doing really well right now. But in all honesty, I think that we don't really know yet. I think that the effects, especially on the girls, her daughters, are going to be long lasting, and we won't know for 5 or 10 years what this truly has done to them and how they're going to be able to interact in relationships, and as they enter systems, the education system, the healthcare system, God forbid, but the judicial system. Like, we don't know what their response to authority figures is going to be. So I think right now they're doing well, and we're trying to support Cindy and the girls as much as possible and talk them through everything. But, it remains to be seen. And I think that's the sort of a hidden factor in all of this mass incarceration, is that, we invest in putting people away for these long sentences at $50,000, $60,000 a year, and we don't rehabilitate them, and we don't prepare them for what life after prison is.
I'll take it one step further, Rudy. I think not only don't we rehabilitate them, we almost have our boot on their throat when they come out. If you're a convicted felon, your sister did good, she got a job, but it's very hard to get employment. It's very hard to get a housing. A lot of apartments turn you down, and housing. It's hard to get banking. Believe it or not, life insurance, voting. I could go on and on, but instead, it seems to me that instead of trying to uplift people after they get out, for whatever the offense is, it's society and the system almost seems to oppress them, and it makes them work. It makes it worse. And when someone goes away, I think you did an artful job of illustrating how it doesn't affect just the person, but it has a ripple effect on the whole entire family. And I don't know how your family got through it, because it just seems so traumatizing. And maybe it's this film that's kind of the glue that's holding them together. I don't know, but it's unbelievable how your family got through it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the film is acting as a bit of a healing mechanism for them as well. I think seeing how their story is affecting people is part of the healing. Understanding that they haven't gone through something that other people haven't already gone through or are still going through. They don't feel alone or stigmatized during this process. And I think, it's I mean, that's the overall message of this film is, we have to look at this in a more holistic way.
So your sister gets out, you make the film. How does it get to Sundance, and then how does it get to HBO?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to have an amazing production company come on to help me finish the last part of filming, and through post-production, Park Pictures came on, and I brought on a great editor, Viri Lieberman, to help me finish the film, and a great team. And we submit to Sundance through the normal channels, and we got that miracle call that everyone wants to get, saying, we'd love to invite you to the Sundance Film Festival. And, we go there, and the film goes in really under the radar for the most part. And it was just amazing. We had that very cliche Sundance moment where the film has a great premiere and there's a little bit of buzz, and you see it start to grow throughout the week. And but before the week was done, 2 days after, I think 2 or 3 days after our premiere, HBO asks if we can have a sit down, and they expressed interest in acquiring the film. And they asked, what is it that you want to do with this film? And I said, I didn't make this film to make money. I made this film to make change. And one of the big sticking points for me is that I want the ability to share it with not only communities that want it or can see it, but communities that need to see it. And, they've been amazing throughout this process of allowing me to take the film, not only to festivals, but to panels and in organizations. And, I've been traveling the country since Sundance, showing it to anyone who wants to see it, and to communities that need to see it. And, we had that storybook ending at the end of Sundance. We ended up winning the 2018 audience award for a U.S. feature doc, which is, it blew my mind completely.
So I believe your father, I can only imagine how proud he was, because in the beginning you told the story of when they came to this country, and they're true Americans. They may not have been born here, but they really are what makes this country great. What I call salt of the earth people who just work and work and work so their family would have a better tomorrow than they had yesterday. And your parents did that. So he must have been unbelievable. He must have been, I'm literally tearing up thinking about it from a father's point of view, but he must have been so proud.
Yeah, I think they're very proud. They, and as much as I'm proud of them, the whole reason why I made this film, when I found out that we got into Sundance, I called my mom and I told her, we got into Sundance, and they don't really know what I do for a living.
I don't think my mother knows what Sundance is.
Yeah. And through no fault of anyone, Sundance is kind of a bubble, and my mom was like, "Oh, mijo, congratulations! Can we do it in New York?" And I was like, "Well, they're going to do it in Utah, but I'll ask." And then I called my father, and he had sort of a similar reaction, just kind of like, "Oh, congrats!" Like he didn't know the magnitude of it. And then my sister actually called them and sort of told them what it meant, the odds of this little film getting in, the odds of it getting into competition, like all these things. And my dad called me back and he was crying. And he just kept saying over and over and over again, he kept saying, "How did you know? How did you know? How did you know?" And I told him, I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know that anyone was ever going to watch this film. I didn't know that I was going to finish this film. I didn't know that Cindy was going to get clemency. I certainly didn't know I was going to get into Sundance. And I told him what I did know, Dad, was that we were about to embark on a very trying time in our family's life. And we were going to get through it with grace and poise. And we were going to be proud of how we came out on the other end. And I wanted to capture that. And, and that's where the heart of the film is. There was no agenda. There was no political agenda. There was no anything other than wanting to capture what a family's experience is going to be like and hopefully help others.
And that has led you're a professional filmmaker now, correct?
Yeah.
And I think I read somewhere that you like to do comedies. This was no comedy, I can tell you that. But is that correct?
Yeah, I sort of lived two lives. Like I said, I became a filmmaker to make this film. And prior to this, I was a teacher and I was an actor and a writer, and always just really wanting to have a voice and be a part of the overall conversation. Growing up, I felt like I didn't have one. I felt like I was overlooked and my community was overlooked and nobody was listening. But, it was interesting that it took this to really help me find my voice. And I became a filmmaker to make this, but I pushed myself to become the best filmmaker that I could to make this as strong as possible. So, I got a job as a production assistant, turned that into becoming a sound mixer, turned that into becoming an additional camera operator, eventually a cinematographer, shooting films for Whoopi Goldberg, and Robert De Niro, and Sam Pollard, and Sebastian Younger, and, just doing everything I could to try and be the best storyteller that I could be for this project.
Well, Rudy, you told a heck of a story. You really did, on behalf of Cindy and your nieces and your family. Before we end, and I really appreciate your time, I know it's incredibly valuable now, but what can people who are seeing this do? Hearing the story is great, and I would recommend everyone, if you haven't seen it, go to HBO and watch it, tweet about it, post it on Facebook. But what can people do to affect change? Because seeing it's great, but really we need changes in the law, because there's millions and millions of people who are in the same situation today, and it's ripping apart the fabric of this country. So what do you think people can do to affect change?
I think of course voting is the pillar of everything, and really is how we're going to have change. But I think the overall criminal justice reform movement needs to transcend politics in a lot of ways. I think that the partisan rhetoric has really damaged the opportunity to truly have sentence reform and criminal justice reform, because we find ourselves aligning with political sides rather than where maybe our hearts and our minds lie. I think that we need to have a hearts and minds revolution in this country and understand that it's no longer okay to incarcerate people at this rate and allow people to profit off of it. I think step one is understanding that we can no longer allow people to profit off of this. We need to take the profit out of incarceration and move to a more, because whether you can watch my film and not have a single emotion about anything that's going on in it, that's completely fine. But what you cannot deny is that there are people, thousands and thousands of people in our criminal justice system sentenced right now to ludicrous sentences that can be contributing members of society, that deserve a second chance, and they don't need to be a burden on your tax dollars.
So I would just one, I don't want to say correction, it's not my place to correct you, but I would up your numbers from thousands. There's probably 1 million people.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I hate to say it, there's probably 1 million people. And again, for those critics, and I know I'm going to get a lot of critics because we've done a bunch on criminal justice reform. I'm not talking about the murderers, the rapists. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the non-violent offenders who maybe got caught with some weed or like Cindy, some nonsense. They send her away for 15 years. It's just, this is not an American thing. And it's just, it's un-American. It's ridiculous. Well, look, Rudy, I can't thank you enough. I just want to tell the audience that what I think you need to do is you need to stand up and be loud, because the only thing that politicians care about is their power. So I think you need to tweet, Instagram, Facebook, contact them, protest, because that's the only way change is going to affect it, is once we stand up and know that there's millions of people who are suffering. And these are good people. Again, I'm not talking about the bad people of the world. I'm talking about good, honest people. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they should be, maybe we shouldn't be putting people in jail who we don't like. We should be putting people in jail who we're scared of. Maybe Cindy should have gone for 30 days, or even a mother for 30 days. I don't even think she should have gone for that, to be honest with you. Put her on a probation period or something like that. But the justice system is nonsense. And I would encourage everyone to research the criminal justice reform movement, because there's a whole movement sweeping away this country. And I really think, I know it's been partisan for a long time, but I think it's starting to become bipartisan on both sides. Rudy, I can't thank you enough. Again, I feel like we've never met. We've only spoken for a few minutes before this, but I tell you, I feel like you're a brother, my friend.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And I wish you and your family and everyone lots of luck. And I'm going to be looking for some of your comedy.
Please do. There should be some stuff
when you have a comedy, I want you back, my friend.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to post Rudy's contact information. Check out The Sentencing on HBO. Thank you very much, everyone.